Thank you for joining this Water News podcast. I'm David Duncan, broadcasting on behalf of OOSKAnews, the world's leading provider of news related to global water challenges. You can find our water news at www.ooskanews.com. That's OOSKANEWS.com. The annual United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP, they're known as COPs, convened in November this year in Marrakech, Morocco, and was attended by about 30,000 individuals from governments, the private sector, civil society and NGOs. Focal issues of this 22nd COP, or COP22 as it's known, included water scarcity, water cleanliness and water-related sustainability to an unprecedented and welcome degree. OOSKAnews attended and reported on the Marrakech conference. I had an opportunity to talk to a number of attendees and participants with particular water-related perspectives on climate change. Today, OOSKAnews is joined by Eduardo Mansur, the Director of the Land and Water Division of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Welcome, Eduardo. There's been a lot of talk about elevation of the water discussion in the climate conference this year. As with your position in the FAO, you're very much at the cutting edge of where water meets climate, meets agriculture.
Thank you, David. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity of talking about this very interesting topic for us. For the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, this COP means a lot. You know that Paris Agreement makes a big change on the debate, on the negotiations, because the agreement now entered into force. And we are calling this COP here in Marrakech as the COP of Action, the COP of Africa, and the COP of Adaptation. And you can imagine how important it was for us from the agriculture sectors, forestry, agriculture, food crops, livestock, fiber, energy crops, to have the opportunity to engage in the climate debate. And the FAO is particularly pleased with the possibility of joining forces with partners here at the COP, where we want to make a bold intervention in agricultural adaptation. And we had to choose an entry point to discuss agricultural adaptation. And after lots of thinking, all my staff, colleagues, teams decided that water scarcity would be a good entry point to discuss, to bring to the attention of the decision makers, of the policy makers, of the investors, the issue of agriculture and water in agriculture. As you know, agriculture is responsible for 70% in average of the water withdrawals. And in countries where agriculture is the backbone of the economy, this percentage is even higher. And we are facing a situation today that we have changing food habits. We waste a lot of food. We waste average of 30% of the food we produce. And to produce this food, we need a lot of water. In some crops, we waste even more, like fruits or root crops. We can reach 50% of food waste. You can imagine what it would mean for water conservation if we could reduce food waste. What it could mean for feeding the hunger. So there are entry points in the water issues that are outside the water box, if you know what I mean. Of course, we have to improve irrigation, improve water efficiency in agriculture. This is obvious. We have to work on this. But we have to understand the underlying causes of water scarcity to address them. I mentioned to you changing food habits. There is also the need to increase the production. We have an increasing population on the planet, and the expectation is that by 2050 we are going to move from 7 to 9 billion people. We have to feed 9 billion people. Can we do that? We can. There's no problem in doing that because we already produce food for 9 billion. We are consuming as 9 billion now. We cannot reach 9 billion people and consume as 12 billion. That's the problem. So we have to understand the consuming part there to produce food that is safe. When we talk about food safety, we talk a lot about water because it's the backbone of food safety and production of food safety. Food that is nutritious, and food that is abundant to attend the human needs in all parts of the world. And water has been understood by my colleagues, by our partners, as the good entry point to discuss adaptation. I mentioned to you that this is the COP of adaptation. COPs, the climate COPs have been many times on the mechanisms, especially the mechanisms of mitigation, of reducing emissions. I think from Paris to now, there is an important change that people are looking more of not only on reducing emissions, but how to adapt to the climate change. Because we have sufficient and abundant scientific evidence that the climate is changing, meaning we are likely to have more extreme events, including floods and droughts. And when we have droughts, the sector that is mostly affected, no doubt about it, is agriculture. Droughts are inevitable in the conditions that we are looking at the climate change, but they don't have to turn into famine if we can address the issue of water scarcity. And then it's not only an issue of North Africa and Near East. You in the US can easily identify the regions where water scarcity is very important, and there are means to address this issue. The North Africa and Near East has strong experience in certain areas of water management that are very interesting, like for instance wastewater or reclaimed water use. And this knowledge, the knowledge that exists in US, in China, in North Africa, in various countries of the world, have to be disseminated if we want to address water scarcity in agriculture in a fair manner. What I mean fair manner? That is the whole issue of, because water scarcity is not only physical scarcity. Sometimes it's economic scarcity. You have the water resources, but you don't have access to that. And sometimes it's institutional scarcity, because you don't have the institutional framework that allow people to have access to the resource in a fair manner. That the disadvantaged groups, the family farmings, the woman, the child, they spend long times, especially in the rural areas, looking for the water resources, especially under water conditions. So if we facilitate this access to the water in a fair manner, taking into account gender and equity issues, we are going to build conditions for sustainable agricultural development. At the end, this is what we're looking for. And we are fascinated with the opportunity of using the water as an entry point. So FAO decided to launch here at COP22 in Marrakech a new global initiative. This initiative is named Coping with Water Scarcity in Agriculture, a global framework for action in a changing climate. We are inviting our partners, governments, institutions, to join efforts under two major groups. What we're calling the knowledge group, because the knowledge is out there, but if it doesn't reach those that can use this knowledge, it's of little impact. And I think we have had enough of piloting projects around the world to demonstrate that it's possible. We know it's possible. We have to be transformational and scale it up to make sure that the people are applying new techniques. They have to be tailored to their conditions. There is no blueprint for water solutions, because it's according to the abundance on the resources, which means that water accounting and water auditing are very important. You have to have a good baseline. It's according to the institutional framework of the availability of financial resources to address the issue. And then you have to adapt it to the different techniques. You see, we have been very successful in a regional initiative here in North Africa and Near East that FAO launched in 2013, named Water Scarcity in Agriculture. We are not very regional, the name is the same for both the global and the regional. But in the regional one, for instance, we have learned a lot in terms with the countries, with the farmers themselves, that sustainable soil management and for water harvesting and for improving soil conditions have a great impact on the availability of food and on the sustainability and improving food crops. Using varieties, using species, both vegetable and animal species and livestock that are more resistant to drought conditions have different impacts. We have to manage it carefully, but it can have a positive impact if managed carefully to increase food supply. And of course, making water available where it is needed in different ways. We are working now with more solar pump water irrigation schemes, which make access easier to groundwater. Everything that you do in nature has to be done with care. And you know, we learn a lot with our ancestors and the traditional community. It's a lot to be learned by looking at the traditional agriculture systems, because people have been learning in interaction with nature how to manage this resource in a sustainable way. Sometimes it goes out of hand, mostly the case of ambition to create special conditions like diverting water sources or increasing fertilization or control of pests and disease that end up in causing pollution. Everything in the extremes in nature fire back. And we are careful in promoting this new agriculture with a vision of sustainability. So this is basically where we are here at the COP. We are launching the new initiative. We are excited with the opportunity to use water as an entry point for agricultural adaptation. And we are inviting our partners to join efforts. Another important happening here at the COP that I think I would like to refer to you is regarding, I told you about the knowledge group in this new initiative. The other group that we are calling partners to join efforts is an investment. If we talk about transformational projects, we have to reach out capacity to make these transformations, and this requires funding. FAO is very happy now to learn that we have been accredited as an agency of the Green Climate Fund. I'm sure you're familiar with the Green Climate Fund. It's a big commitment of the developed countries to fund through this mechanism of the convention of the UNFCCC the actions on mitigation and adaptation that will be transformational in our reality. And we are very excited to work also with the other partners that are accredited, but mostly with the countries themselves, because they have to be the forefront of the transformational changes. What we are offering are joining efforts to understand, as I told you, first the availability of the resource, the intervention that could be proposed for sustainability in water resource management for agriculture, and then the monitoring aspects, the monitoring and auditing aspects that will let you track your path of development towards the sustainable development goals. Let me close with the aspects of sustainable development goals. You know that we reached, for us that work in the UN, it was very important to reach the agreement of the member countries around these 17 sustainable development goals. They were adopted last year in September in New York. And what we call in the acronym SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the number 6 is about water, and water scarcity is one of the targets addressing the issue of water scarcity, 6.4, very much at our heart nowadays. But it's not alone, because we have to address it in the context of other SDGs that are interrelated. The first SDG number 1, is eradicating poverty. That's where all the other 16 look at too. Number 2 is zero hunger, is eradicating hunger. You have the other 6 is on water, 13 is on climate, 15 is sustainable use of natural resources. They are interlinked.
All of which makes water a great entry point.
Water is finally in the political picture, and I think this COP gives us an opportunity to showcase the importance of water as an entry point for addressing global issues. We have had the opportunity here at the COP to have the Action Day on water. Water is going to be high, at least for us, in the Agriculture Action Day, where we are going to showcase the importance of this new initiative on coping with water scarcity in a changing climate in agriculture. And I think you have accompanied a series of events that are going on at the COP, where the water community is linking very much to the ministers of environment, to the ministers of agriculture and to the ministers of finance. This is a COP. This is a multi-ministerial COP, I would say, and as the events are evolving very nicely around these new entry points. And I still think that adaptation has been giving us this great opportunity, adaptation to climate change. So I think this is the scenario I could put to you at this stage.
The use of water as an entry point, and you've emphasised the importance of financing, and you sense improvement in the presentation of water to the finance minister level and the Green Climate Fund. A lot of political will is required, and the water community has been seen to be working very closely together, collaboratively in the last week and a half. There is a further challenge, surely, though, and that is political will is often driven by public awareness and public discourse. The front pages of the developed world's press cover climate issues. Now, they didn't 20 years ago, but they still don't cover water issues unless it's a drought or a flood. What's the next step to get people talking about water as an entry point, not just water people, but the body politic?
I thank you for this question. It's very interesting. I think that people who work in the water sector, in the case of FAO, we work in the water for agriculture sector. One of the things that we have to do, you spot very much the point that communication is key. And the work that you are doing, let me congratulate you for this. It's essential that we have good communication on water issues for people to understand what we are aiming at and what can be the water sector contribution to solution of global problems. But I think the part of the responsibility is, of course, with us from the water sector, and we have to maybe think outside the water box. You notice that I described to you, I start our interview on water by describing food safety and food waste and food security. For us in agriculture is an entry point to address the issue of water. If we, from the water sector, we see the implications of the water, at least in the nexus approach that we are familiar with when we link food, agriculture and energy, I think the other sectors, the food sector, the energy sector, will understand the importance. And they're not going to compete. They're going to understand that if they don't work with the water issues, they're not going to resolve their problems.
Sure.
So, the World Economic Forum in Davos, they give us an entry point, because every year water appear in the World Risk Report in a very high scale. In terms of impact, last year report in 2015 was number 1. So we have the platforms now, and what we are doing here in the COP is more or less this, to putting the water agenda inside the agenda of the other sectors. And this is what I call think outside the water box. And being defensive and competing for the funds. Of course, you have to position yourself, but there is a limit that you can reach. If you join with the sectors that will tell you that they are needing your inputs to resolve their problems, I think we will scale up a lot the understanding of water issues.
Thank you very much, Eduardo.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.